You're listening to the Nikhil Hogan Show, Episode 5. Welcome back, everybody. This is Episode 5 of the Nikhil Hogan Show, and we have a special treat today. We have an amazing musician with us today, Rit Xu. Rit is an unbelievable player. He's a flutist, and he's got an incredible CV. He was the winner of the NFA Jazz Artist Competition in 2014. He was the first Southeast Asian to win a solo jazz competition in the United States. He's an honor graduate in classical flute performance from Yong Siew Toh Conservatory of the National University of Singapore. And so he's got the classical background and the jazz background. He's played, he's performed at so many festivals. He is prominently featured in the Swiss Youth Jazz Orchestra at the annual Jazzar Festival, led by Swiss jazz stalwart Fritz Reynolds. And he's recently opened his own studio as well. And I mean, it just, you know what, Rit, it's unbelievable. Yeah. You have such a great CV.
Thanks, man.
I think my audience gets the drift. You are a fantastic player. And I have witnessed your playing up close. We played together on one occasion.
Yeah, we did. Yeah, and, that was like 2 years ago, right?
It was like 2 years ago. Yeah,
almost a couple of years ago. Yeah.
I came back from the United States, and I mean, it was just so great to be with a strong musician. And we were playing a jazz gig, right? Remember that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was it.
We were playing, and I remember your favorite tune was. You told me one of your favorite standards was "There will never be another year." Yeah, there will never be another year. Yeah.
I mean, that tune has such a beautiful melody, and also the harmonic changes is so sweet.
Harmonic changes. Oh, okay, we're gonna really get into it in this show. And now you said harmonic changes. Now, you know, this show is really, I really want it to be an in-depth show for non-musicians too. I want non-musicians to be able to get the chance to hear how great musicians think. And now you play jazz and classical music.
Mm-hmm.
Now you play jazz and classical.
Mm-hmm.
Now that to some people, they are almost alien worlds. They don't connect like a classical,
right.
Like when you're doing classical study, and it's almost so different from jazz music. What are the differences? Can you articulate what are the differences in the training to be a modern day classical musician, and what's the difference to be a jazz musician?
For me, the biggest difference is I think it really boils down to a few things. But the common denominator of all is that you have to, first of all, master your instrument.
Right.
Right. You have to be on top of your game when it comes to knowing your instrument, and then putting the work to really figure out the ins and outs of what works and what doesn't.
Now, are you talking specifically about classical music, or are you talking about jazz?
I'm talking about instrumental playing in general.
Okay.
And then when it comes to, the different genres, I feel that classical music, a lot of times, we have to adhere to the script, right?
Right.
There's something right in front of us, and we have to be faithful to the notes. We have to be, take extra care of what's going on on the paper. Whereas for improvising traditions such as jazz music, it's about getting as much vocabularies as you can, so that you could have a spontaneous conversation on the fly. So I think it's two different traditions, and to be able to.
Let me ask you this question, Ret.
Right.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but you're such a good player in both styles. I'm wondering, have you ever considered improvisation in classical music? Because you can clearly improvise in jazz.
Right. Yeah. So actually, improvisation has a tradition in classical music as well, and it goes way back into we're talking 400-500 years back in Bach's days. Johann Sebastian Bach. In Baroque music, all of it was actually improvised, and to be a musician at that time.
Hold on a second. So you're saying in Bach's time? So Bach was. So you're saying he was at his back in the day, he was more known for being a
Yeah,
virtuoso, an
he was
improviser.
he was a great improviser, and he was just like a all-rounded musician in all aspects.
I see. He now
Yeah.
what now actually classical music, it's not just one. It is in a way you could deem it classical music, and but there really are different eras, right? There's
Mm-hmm.
the classical era with Mozart. There's the romantic
Mm-hmm.
period
Mm-hmm.
with Chopin and
Yeah.
Liszt and Schumann.
Right.
Then there's the impressionist with
Right.
Debussy and Baroque with
Right.
Bach. Now what now you in your training as a classical musician,
Mm-hmm.
what really differentiates these different eras?
Um, I guess when it comes to flute playing, a lot of the repertoire that we learned has to do with it goes all the way back to the Baroque era, as well as a lot of French music, a lot of French classical music, romantic composers like Gabriel Fauré and Philippe Gobert and those guys, and those are some of my favorites actually.
Now, so Gabriel Fauré,
Yeah,
he's a Frenchman. What
yeah,
I think he's the 19th century, right?
yeah. He's the 19th century.
So he's kind of a romantic figure then.
Yeah, kind of sort of like mid to late romantic.
What is it in the harmonies of classical music? Uh, I think we have to go back. We have to take a couple of steps back. It's such a
Hmm.
deep topic. I want to talk about the flute. Actually, we're going to get to harmony and the
Okay.
romantic era. First
Hmm.
thing, let's get a small thing I've always wondered out of the way. Is it
Hmm.
flutist or flautist? What's the difference?
I get that all the
You
time.
must get that all the time.
Yeah. Well, I usually say if the best thing to say is flute player. Yeah.
There's an A. Why is there an A? Have you ever wondered about that?
Um, for me, I think from what I know, because in Italian, flute is known as flauto,
I
and
see.
so
I
and
see.
so that flautists derive from that. But because we are native English speakers, so flutist is fine. Flutist is perfectly fine.
I only have you for a limited time, so I need to get as much knowledge of the flute as possible I can in this
Sure.
episode. Now, you are just a
Yeah.
fabulous. It's a beautiful instrument, and people actually don't realize how
Mhm.
much it is in almost every recording. I mean, if you think movies,
Right.
music, classical music, video games, television,
Yeah.
the flute
Yeah.
is almost everywhere, and nobody knows about that.
Right. You're right. It is.
Could you talk about how the flute is used? Talk about the different areas that the flute is used, even today. I mean, in all the situations.
Um, I think most people would usually hear it in the symphony orchestra setting, and as well as in concert bands and wind bands, which is a more familiar situations in especially in public schools in Singapore. As well as you hear it I mean, sometimes you hear it in religious settings as well, and then you hear it in films and movies, as you said, and as well as TV music, games music. Yeah, it's pretty much everywhere.
That's unbelievable. Do you
Yeah.
what do you think of? I wanted to ask you, what made you pick up the flute actually?
Um, I think my love affair with the flute began like when I probably was around 11 or 12, because my dad is a musician.
I read that.
As
I read that in your bio.
yeah.
Your dad was playing in. Was he playing jazz piano?
Yeah, he was. I mean, he was making a living doing like music arrangements and doing the commercial stuff. But deep down, he's quite a jazz lover himself.
Was he self-taught himself, or did he go to
Yeah, he
school?
was pretty much self-taught.
Wow. And did he
Yeah,
did he give you lessons?
he did. But the thing with dads, the thing with taking lessons from your
Parents,
own
yeah.
father is that it's sometimes it just some things doesn't work.
Right, right. No,
Yeah,
I can understand that. Yeah.
yeah,
But he must have been a huge influence on you
it
to have
is.
such a strong. And would you say he was a very strong musician? And to play jazz
Yeah.
piano is pretty demanding.
It is, and in every ways, I think he still is one of my biggest influence in just in terms of showing me the right stuff, and just giving me the tools as well as setting the right frame of mind, like having the right mindset to approach music and to be able to absorb everything. And I think he was really the main reason for me for who I am today.
You took flute lessons. Did you have a flute teacher? Did you?
Yeah, I did.
So tell me about that. So was it like classical flute lessons, and were you going for
Um,
like graded
so
exams?
yeah, I did a bit of that as well, and then I went on to the conservatory.
Oh wait,
So I
hold
studied.
on. That's a big jump.
Yeah.
So what age did you pick up the flute again?
I picked it up when I was 12, going to 13.
Okay, so that's
Yeah.
would you say that's relatively late?
I would say, I mean, if one is to consider a full-fledged classical career, probably that would be a late start.
But you must have been
Yeah.
practiced your tail off, right? To
Yeah, I mean, I love the instrument and I love the practice. So that's one thing that really sets the difference because I have friends who are, they absolutely hate to practice. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you were you at that time from between your early teens to before the conservatory, were you mainly playing classical music or were you also playing jazz influenced by your dad?
I was dabbling a little bit on improvisation as well as playing a lot of like the conventional wind band music
Right.
and stuff like that. Yeah.
In secondary school, were you like in a music CCA?
Yeah, I was in the school wind band.
Okay.
Uh-huh.
Was that how like I think that must have been important for you, right? To get that constant music on a weekly, almost perhaps daily basis, always playing, using your instrument a lot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think one of the advantage of playing in ensembles is that you really get to work on certain skills like sight reading and just playing in the ensembles and getting a sense of what it means to make music together.
What were your first experiences playing an ensemble, and could you describe what the important things you really got out of that? I think it must have been that jump from just taking solo lessons and then finding yourself in a band. Did you have good teachers running the band ensemble?
I had a couple of meaningful moments. So I mean, playing in ensembles situation, it really requires a different set of skills.
You have to listen a lot, right?
Yeah, you have to listen a lot, and you have to be able to blend, and you have to be able to. I mean, besides knowing your notes well, you have to like just have a wide, like I call it a radar. Like you have to have a wide range of like a radar has to like sort of absorb everything that's going on around you.
Were you this is you're a great player. I mean, a fantastic player. Were there any other kids your age at the time that intimidated you or you found really impressive?
Um, I was
Because like
mostly checking out.
because
I was mostly
most kids,
checking out.
because
Uh-huh.
like most kids, there's that competitive edge, or there's always a kid who's like really talented, and either it can be
Yeah,
very
yeah,
encouraging or discouraging.
yeah, yeah. I guess I was quite lucky in the sense that I was constantly checking out players that are better than myself, and then that gives me sort of like an inspiration to work harder and to play better.
What do you think of
So
that
I,
Pat Metheny line? It's good. It's important. You should be the worst person in the band, then you'll learn the most.
yeah, I started out pretty much that way. Yeah,
It's hard to believe that, but
yeah, yeah, yeah.
so okay.
It
So
is, and I think there's a lot of truth in that.
now, were you? When did you start playing your first jazz gigs?
Um, I think my first professional jazz gig was when I was 20,
Okay,
probably. Yeah,
so you must have been. Wait, you were in NS, right? Too. So
yeah, yeah.
so was that right after national
It
service?
was actually like a bit before,
Okay.
right before, yeah, just before. Yeah, I was already doing some work on the side.
For my listeners, national service is the mandatory military service that males have to do in Singapore at the age of 18. So after, was it always your dream? So when did you actually decide music is going to be my career and I'm going to go and get further education at a conservatory?
I think it was right before I went into the. I was right before I went into NS.
Okay.
So I sort of already made the goal that okay, this is what I'm gonna do for the rest of my life, hopefully.
Right, right.
Yeah.
And so, what's conservatory life like?
Um, it's competitive, and I don't think it's nice that the school provides an environment as well as the resources for you to be the best player that you can be. But I also don't think that it's meant for everyone. Like I think you need a certain kind of determination and
Right.
a certain kind of just wanting to do it so badly.
Is it is
Um,
do you have to cram in a lot of playing in those short four? Is it 3 or 4 years?
it was a 4-year program.
Okay, so
So
that
we
means
did we
you have
did
to
a lot
play.
of
Do you have to do a lot of concertos and chamber music
yeah,
and
yeah, a lot of that chamber music, concertos, and learning the repertoire, and yeah. So it was a good 4 years. I enjoyed it.
was your sight reading already at a good level at that point?
Um, Before, I mean, by the time when I entered the conservatory, I was already doing a lot of already playing quite a bit of classical music. So the reading part came easier. But I think for anyone looking to pick up like any skills in general, you just have to spend quite an intense amount of time
Right.
just working on something, just one thing at a time. So yeah, well, I think when I was still in high school, I did a lot of reading, so that really helped.
Yeah, and to my audience, for reading, we're talking about reading music notation,
Right, right,
notes
yeah,
on a
yeah,
page. Yeah,
yeah.
I'm really actually, Rit, I'm very fascinated just about your whole learning process and how you got to where you are today. Because I really admire you as a player, and I really want to dive deep into what what you practiced, what you listened to, the players you listened to. So let's really get more into that. So.
Okay.
It also goes without saying that you were also playing a lot of pop gigs too, right? You were playing
Mm-hmm.
pop music all in that time as well.
Yeah, sure.
So, how do you how do you get gigs playing the flute in a pop ensemble?
um, when I first started out, I was accompanying a lot of singers, a lot of vocalists. So I sort of developed a strategy to accompany singers, and I think that is quite a helpful
Okay,
skill to have.
tell us that strategy. What is that strategy?
I mean, the number one rule is always don't get in the way of the singer.
So that means when they're singing, you only fill in like in between the breaths, something like that.
Yeah, yeah, that's right. And then just finding pockets of space to say something on the instrument, but at the same time, not being. I mean, just having an awareness of your role in the band. Like for me, the model has always been people like Branford Marsalis and Sting.
Right.
Yeah, I'm sure everyone knows Sting, right?
Now, with Branford Marsalis, you've touched on a very serious musician there.
Right.
He and his
Yeah.
brother Winton, the trumpet
Yeah.
player. Now, Branford,
Mhm.
he's kind of a tough guy, and like if you read his interviews, he can
Mhm.
be pretty harsh on some people sometimes, right?
Right. Yeah, he does.
And that's in a way I kind of understand what he's saying because it's demanding if you want to play at a high level, correct?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, he has always been like my role model for like just the musical output,
With
the stuff that he does. Yeah.
I feel like I'm jumping all over the place, but it's just it's just so interesting because I just so fascinated by your development and well, since we're kind of talking about Brantford and we're talking about jazz,
Uh-huh.
let's talk about that jazz competition. No,
Uh-huh.
actually, before we get there, uh, I think a lot of people, especially a lot of non-musicians, they don't really know what it takes to play jazz because jazz is quite difficult to play. So let's break it down for them, Rit. So let's say you're a non-musician, you want to play jazz
Uh-huh.
in a band, right? Let's say you're playing the flute. Now,
Uh-huh.
what are the couple of things you need just to stand on stage and be part of the song?
You gotta master your instrument. you gotta you gotta know the your basics, like the ins and outs. I mean, like you gotta know your. I mean, we're
Be
talking
specific. You can
really
be
fundamental
specific. So,
stuff.
like, do you need like certain scales, certain
Yeah, I mean,
arpeggios?
just having a grasp. Yeah, just having a grasp of what basic harmonies and what it scales, and having a good sense of time. I think that's, to me, it's really important.
Do you do you have to practice fitting things together? So, finding out what scales work on certain chords.
Um, I think in the beginning, it kind of works that way. But then it became a part of you. Once that knowledge has been absorbed, then you just gotta let it go and just be in the moment and play what the music needs of you in the moment.
Right. It's that's quite a massive leap. I realize for our audience because there's imagine that there's a student that comes to you and
Uh-huh.
he says, "Rit, man, I'd love to play like you. What are
Uh-huh.
can you name me a couple of scales that I need to work on, or like a certain number of figures I have to work on, or
So I
what
would probably show.
for an
Uh-huh.
absolute beginner, what would you recommend they work on?"
Um, I think having a couple of years of playing experience would help. Doesn't
Okay.
matter whether it's in jazz or in classical, but as long as you have been playing that instrument for a while and you kind of know the ins and out of the instrument, and then I would probably recommend just really knowing your major and minor scales, and then getting to some triads and simple arpeggios and all those stuff, and then just learning a couple of vocabularies as well.
Does do you have to learn as many heads as in the melodies of the songs
Oh yeah,
as
yeah.
possible?
That would be that would be useful, but that will come in maybe later.
Does
Yeah.
how about is it important to have a mentor to guide you for learning this kind of music?
Oh, definitely. I can't stress that even more because I mean, just having the right teacher will save you lots of time in terms of finding the truth.
Is there an example where you had to struggle to figure something out yourself that could have, but if you had a mentor to teach you, would have saved you a lot of time?
Wow, that's a good question. Um,
Like when it
yeah.
comes to like playing a piece or some kind of experience thing on stage.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
So maybe like let's consider like just certain like stagecraft, like when to come in, or certain tricks or certain. It's hard to articulate, right? Because it's
Right.
such a wide question that
Right. Yeah.
that you only know it when somebody tells you what it is,
Right.
right?
So, um, I mean, along the way, I was developing some personal approach to improvising and that sort of stuff. And then I was doing a lot of things and not realizing that there are certain things that I should do more. Which
Like what?
some like let's say rhythm, right?
Okay.
Like just when you play swing, you gotta have a couple of triplets sometimes, and then you just gotta, if you play jazz music, you gotta have the feeling of the blues and all those
So when
things.
you're saying triplets, you mean
Yeah.
like your lines, the melodies that you play, you got to have some rhythmic variety. So you got to throw in some triplets here and there.
Yeah, right, yeah. And those
Okay.
things, I mean, I was kind of fiddling around, but I wasn't getting too serious about it. And
So
then
you mean
along the
there's a
way,
danger of like playing too many eight notes in a row, just
yeah,
like da da da
yeah,
da 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 da. Yeah.
exactly. Because
Okay.
I think a stream of eight notes is it's cool, but to the listeners, after a while, it gets boring.
So like a guy like Sonny Rollins, right, who's very rhythmically
Oh yeah,
interesting. That's like
yeah.
who else is very rhythmically interesting that's worth listening to for that kind of rhythmic variety?
Wow, there's too many to name. um, I mean,
I think I like for me Sonny Rollins I get that sense that he's very rhythmically sound.
yeah, it is.
All
It
the
is.
old guys like the Charlie Parker and Bud Powell, they can
Yeah, I mean
swing,
the
man.
bebop guys probably like
Dizzy
the guys that came
Gillespie,
out from the bebop era. I mean, those are worth checking out.
absolutely.
Yeah.
So when it comes to jazz improvisation. I want to know how
Uh-huh.
you think. So, okay, the highest level was where you don't think about it, right? The subconscious. That's what you were saying just now.
Right.
So, but let's go into the conscious for a second
Okay.
because so that a lot of people can follow us.
Mm-hmm.
Let's say you're learning a new standard, right? Let's
Uh-huh.
say and a standard for the listeners is a common jazz song that is in common parlance amongst the musicians. It's everybody knows it.
Right.
You play it on stage. Everybody knows to play it on
Right.
that song. So let's take an example, maybe like blue bossa. Everybody plays blue bossa. That's one of the common ones.
Okay.
So let's say you've never seen that song before, unheard of. But let's say you've never seen that song before.
Uh-huh.
How would you break it down as an improviser and take from a basic level to an advanced level?
Um, I think first of all, I would find a recording of the tune and try to find something that I like because there are so many renditions, right? So
Right, right, right.
I would just go deep into the I mean nowadays it's so easy to get access to music, right? I mean you have streaming, you have Spotify and Apple Music
Right.
and all those stuff. So
Absolutely.
I would just yeah. So I would just try to find. I mean, of course, we should always try to like figure out what's the original rendition. So maybe Kenny Dorham's, right? Because he's the guy that wrote the
Right,
tune.
right.
So I would check out his tune. I would check out the way he plays it, and then I would learn the tune by ear.
So
I would
no sheet music, no
no
fake
no
book.
sheet music. Yeah, because for a tune like Blue Bossa, it can be done.
Yeah. So
Yeah, it can be
no
done.
fake book. What do you think of fake books? Fake books for people who are listening are these books that are basically it's kind of like sheet music. They have the melody and they just have chord symbols on the top. So you can play the chords and you know the melody.
Right.
There are a lot
Right.
of mistakes in a lot of them, but what's your
Yeah, yeah.
opinion in fake about fake books?
Um,
Are they useful or do you try to avoid them?
I think they are like maps. Like they will show you the way, but they are not the actual thing, stuff like that. But they're not the actual experience. I think the actual experience is to just forget about the fake books and just play the music.
Now, let me ask you a question. Do you have perfect pitch?
No, I don't.
Now, how can that be? How can such a great musician like you, like
Uh,
wonderful musician, not have
um,
perfect pitch?
I I mean
I'm just pretending like I don't know.
no, but personally speaking, I feel that um I um I feel lucky that I don't have perfect pitch.
Right?
Yeah, because in many ways, I mean, in many ways, it can be an advantage to depending on the type of music that you play, right? But when it comes to improvisation, um, when it comes to the different the genres of music that is more ear based, I think having a relative pitch is a much more helpful tool to have.
Yeah. So there are two kinds of ear training: relative pitch and perfect pitch. But
Right.
it's fair to say perfect pitch is pretty rare, right? Although I've
Uh-huh.
heard some studies that maybe in certain Asian countries that because of the tonal language that is
Right.
used, there's a higher incidence of perfect pitch. But
Uh-huh.
generally speaking, most musicians use relative pitch, which is they find out where the one is or the do in whatever particular key, and then they go from there. Just
Uh-huh.
they hear the intervals, right?
I mean that sounds easy, but to take it to a higher level, it requires a lot of work as well.
So
Yeah.
how would you train your ears to get to a high level?
I mean, just listen to any melodies. Like we can just begin with like simple melodies, like you know, like Mary Had a Little Lamb, for instance. Like da 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 da. So right now I don't even know what key I'm in.
Yeah.
I'm just rattling off the melody, and then I could sort of hear a relationship in terms of intervals. Like it's a like 3 2 1 2 3 3 3. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Oh, I see. So that when everybody knows the do re mi fa sol la ti do. Right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
you're associating a number with mi, like mi re do
Right.
re
Yeah.
mi, right? So
Yeah, like scale degrees. Uh-huh.
yeah, so that's a lot of people don't know that. A lot of like most people they have no idea about. Everybody knows do re mi, but you would say a lot of musicians talk in numbers like this, right? They talk maybe not necessarily for melody, but melody yes. But They use it a lot for chords. They use it a lot for melodies. But
Mm-hmm.
musicians talk in numbers quite often, right?
Yeah, I guess
To some extent,
again,
right?
yeah, really depends on the type of music that you play again. Because if you're playing like classical music, like a full-on classical music, then you don't hear that so often.
That's so
Yeah,
interesting.
yeah.
I want to get your input on that in a minute. Let's.
Hmm.
I want to talk about the jazz competition that you won. You're just crushing everyone. You're crushing everyone.
Hmm.
No, so Rit, you won a jazz competition overseas. How did they run the competition? So like, did you have a backing band with you? Were you playing?
Um,
Uh,
so um, so they will receive. I mean, the competition. They will receive entries from flute players from all over the world, and then they will pick. So based on that, they will pick the final winners, and then we get a chance to fly over to perform. Which during my year it was at Chicago.
wow. Who are the
Yeah.
judges?
They're all prominent, flute players in the jazz world. Yeah.
Wow. So you must have say a couple of names, man. I think I really want my audience to just
So
know more musicians,
right, right,
know more great musicians.
right. Ali Ryerson was there,
Okay.
and and then one of the judges was a guy called Billy Kerr, who is I think he's more well known in the States, but he's a great musician.
And
And
then
then right.
what bands were they part of that we can search up? Were they leaders or were they? Do they have a
I'm not too sure about that, but they're pretty active, both as educators and as performers.
Billy
And
Kerr? I'm gonna search him out.
yeah, yeah,
I see. Okay, he studied at
right.
Juilliard, man. This is some serious stuff. And who's the first name again? So can you say the first name?
Ali
Eddie
Ryerson.
Ryson. Eddie
Yeah,
Ryson.
Ali. Ali Ryerson R1, and she's often known as the lady of the jazz flute because amongst many others like they were the first few female jazz flute players that really put the instrument no and into the limelight.
There. Can you name a couple of flute players? I mean,
Right, right.
name the important flute players that people should know in for jazz, and then we're going to talk about classical because I want
Oh, sure.
everyone to know the classical side as well. So name the important jazz players first.
I mean, there's Hubert Laws for sure. There's Herbie Mann, who is more leaning towards the commercial side of things, but nonetheless, great flute player. There's Sam Most. There are a couple. I mean, those guys are of the prior generation, right? But there are a couple. There are a couple of other players of this generation that's really worth checking out as well.
Yeah, this generation. What about this generation too?
Um, there is Gareth Lockrane from England. Uh-huh. And then there's the other guy who was the co-winner of the competition together with me, and his name is Sa Pai.
I actually know this name. He was at
Yeah,
Berkeley.
because he went to Berkeley too.
Yeah, when I went to Berkeley, I saw him
Yeah,
in
yeah,
like
yeah.
he was
Yeah.
jamming in the lobby,
Right.
and it was just unbelievable. What country is he
He's
from actually?
he's a monster. He's from Turkey, I believe.
He's from Turkey. Wow.
Yeah,
Do you
yeah,
know are you guys friends?
yeah, yeah.
Do
We
flute players
connect.
keep a
Yeah,
keep? Are you
we
guys
keep in touch pretty often.
are you guys like a gang? Do you guys know each other?
Yeah, yeah, we do. Yeah, we
I
kind of.
noticed like a lot of instrumentalists tend to keep together. I know guitar players know other guitar players, and it's
Uh-huh.
probably the same for other instruments as well.
Yeah, yeah. It's good to just know where each other. I mean, just good to know like what each other is doing and stuff like that.
Sarpe is an unbelievable musician.
Yeah, yeah.
I saw it firsthand. Now,
Yeah.
let's talk about the classical side. There was a guy, I remember we had a conversation 2 years ago at that gig, and you
Uh-huh.
mentioned there was a classical guy who you said recorded everything.
I'm pretty sure that's James Galway.
I think that's the guy, yeah.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Talk about
Yeah.
him. Why is he
James
important to
Galway.
the classical flute?
I mean, every professional or serious flute players, they would know James Galway. There's just no doubt about it
How do you
because
spell
he
his last name?
Galway, Galway.
He's an Irish virtuoso flute player.
Yeah, he originally from Ireland, I believe, but he's pretty much known all over the world these days.
I remember Charlie Parker when he went to Paris. He had a classical saxophone idol that he went and he met in Paris. I can't remember the name, but
Yeah, the name is Marcel Mew. Is that right?
I think that's it. Yeah, I think
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
it,
yeah,
Marcel.
yeah.
It just goes to show. I mean, to me personally, music is a language.
Uh-huh.
Yes, we have different dialects, but if you're a real true blue musician, you will love music. And if you love music, it doesn't matter what the genre is. You're gonna dig a guy who can play or a gal who can play really
Yeah,
well.
yeah, that's
That's
right. That's truth, man.
Yeah, it's true. I
Yeah.
mean, it's all one language. It's all 12 notes, but I
Mm-hmm.
mean, every different style has its own way of saying things, right?
Right. Yeah, that's the
So
truth right there.
now, man, the time really flew, huh? My goodness. Man, I just love talking music. I mean, I love music. That's the thing, you have to, as we're educators and we want to really teach people about music.
Mm-hmm.
An important thing is I think the teachers have to love music, right? That's a really important thing. You have
Yep.
to really love music. I
Yeah.
feel like if a teacher is really excited to show a student something or really excited to just tell a student about a player that the student's never heard of or some that
Mm-hmm.
curiosity, it's got to come from the teacher and it's got to
Mm-hmm.
rub off on the student, right?
Mm-hmm.
When
Yeah.
you were a student, did you were you always searching? What were the things that really that you were searching for? What excited you as a young player that you were looking for to develop for your development?
Um, I was looking for a great sound, like like in if you when you attend master classes or like in any sort of situations where I get a chance to witness another player's playing, I would
Yeah.
always be looking out for great sound, and then great musicality, and a sense of musical direction. Like you could hear very clearly like where the musical phrases are going and stuff like that. Yeah, so those things always kind of appeal to me.
Now that you're back home for a couple of years after look at this. I'm reading your bio and looking it over and see. Uh, tell me about the Asian Youth Jazz
Hmm.
Orchestra.
It was a collective project that happened in 2016. So we had to do this regional audition, which was held in every country in this part of the world, in Southeast Asia. So, and then they will select a couple of players and they will put them together, and then we will do rehearsals in Japan,
So
and
you
then
won. It says here that you won a spot on the orchestra, right?
yeah, yeah, I
So
did.
so
Yeah.
tell me about that audition process.
Wow. It was one of the auditions that I will remember for a long time
Why?
because
What happened?
like I mean like you said, right, the classical and the jazz thing, so they made me play a Bach flute sonata, and
Right.
then they made me play another jazz standard, and then they want to hear me like improvise over it. So it was a very unique audition in the sense that
Yeah,
you have,
everything, right?
yeah, both roles coming together, and they were really specific on the things that they were looking for. Like they wanted a flute player that could play, make a right sound on the instrument as well as being able to improvise. So I was very lucky that it happened for me.
Do you think there's for the state of music for among the youth? Do you think we're giving kids enough opportunities to learn to improvise, to learn to be creative, to play in ensembles?
Um, well, tough question.
It's a tough one, right? I mean,
Yeah, because I mean
Is
the current.
does our culture promote this? I mean, I'm not talking about like top down or anything. I'm just saying among the mood among everyone when
Hmm.
like let's say a parent wants to get their kids to learn music. Um,
Hmm.
when it comes to learning music, most
Hmm.
parents they assume that if you just send them off to so-called classical lessons,
You're right.
all of this stuff is covered, right? But do you think really there's the important things like improvisation, arranging, ensemble playing. Do you think most kids get that opportunity?
Um, I think it also comes down to personal interest as well as just having an awareness of what kind of music is out there. And I mean, I wouldn't downplay the importance of getting the right classical foundation on your instrument at first.
Oh, I absolutely love classical music, and there's no
Yeah,
doubt about
yeah,
that.
yeah.
I'm wondering, do you feel like when it comes to this our kids here, uh, do you feel like the kids, um, what do you think the kids really, the new generation of Singaporean musicians, or really musicians everywhere out in the world, now based on your experiences when you learned,
Uh-huh.
because I think not many kids have that jazz background or that pop background for that matter. Um,
Right,
I
right.
think I look to you as a kind of a model in a way, right? Because I think a musician, a young musician, should be able to play everything. I mean, it's just music, you know what I mean? If you
Mm-hmm.
have the ears and you know your instrument well,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, you might not be able to be like the best jazz player or the best classical player, but you should be a musician who can jump into a situation and be able to pick up fast and,
Mm-hmm.
and and play music fast. You know, get into the music, right?
Mm-hmm. Right.
Do you think how do we get that culture to really reward that creativity? Because I feel like
Um,
especially in classical music, we're terrified of changing a note here or uh, or like even
yeah,
changing notes or playing something new,
right.
departing from the written score.
Mm-hmm. I think, I mean, there's so many things that we could address here, but for me, what comes to mind first thing is just having the environment where we allow our students to make mistakes. I
Oh,
think,
that's brilliant. That's
yeah,
brilliant.
because like mistakes, I don't know, like maybe in this part of the world, in our country, in the culture or
Yeah.
whatever, like mistakes are not so well received.
Yeah, at a recital, if there's a mistake, there's just the whole room is wincing, and
Yeah, yeah,
it's just
yeah.
everybody
Yeah,
is like, mistakes are like, but like mistakes happen all the time, and they're just chromatically
yeah.
often a half step away from a right note, right?
Yeah, yeah, that's one way to look at it.
But yeah, go on to that top. I love that idea. There's mistakes. You can
So
welcome
I
them.
think, yeah, so and part of that, I mean, being music educators ourselves, we have to just allow that space for our students to just experiment and explore and just like we'll show them one thing, but try to like develop other ways of showing that one thing in many different ways as well. And I think it takes a lot of willingness on the educator's part.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, when it comes to like jazz and improvisation and all that, what I feel that's lacking in our culture is competent educators.
I so agree with that sentiment.
Yeah,
Absolutely. Yeah.
yeah. So we really need that pedagogy going. I mean, it's not happening too much at the moment.
we
So
we need strong players. We need to have the environment of a lot. We have lots of strong players. We should encourage strong players. Definitely, I think so.
yeah, strong players and hopefully strong teachers as well that is able to break it down and to show the students like how it's being done.
Oh, you're speaking my language, Rit. I love it.
Yeah,
Now,
yeah.
how do we get that? How do we get more kids wanting to play and just play out live and have that that competitive urge to show like I want to make my own individual voice and be out there and improvise and arrange and write songs and be creative. How do we get that creative fire back?
How do we get that? Well, I mean, playing in school bands is it's helpful. I mean, it's an ensemble, and then you get to play with your peers. You got to play with your schoolmates and all that. So that's always been around, and I think that's a healthy thing, and we should definitely have that going. And then just having more musical events jam sessions and
Yeah, the jam session.
um,
Did you jam a lot when you were starting out?
I did, yeah. When I was starting out, I did quite a bit, but not so much at the moment, to be honest.
Just like how in Singapore, right? How do those
Yeah.
jam sessions? Because let's face it, right? I mean, that club scene of the 40s and 30s and 50s in New York City, that's very hard. That's probably a time that's not going to happen again, just
Right.
because it's a sign of the times. But
Yeah.
there are elements of that that are absolutely wonderful when it comes to live music. You had musicians trying to so-called cut each other, which means trying to outplay each other for the
Yeah, yeah,
delight of their peers and the delight of the audience. And
yeah.
musicians who, and now, nowadays I kind of joke about this. Everybody's so friendly and loving and everything, and all musicians love each other.
Uh-huh.
But I remember reading these biographies of these musicians, like in the bebop
Yeah.
days. They would
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
if they saw you steal a lick from them, there would be a fist fight, I think. It's pretty funny.
I think that's I think that's what has been that's the appeal of New York for a long time, right?
Yeah, it was that
Yeah.
hotbed of jazz. Actually,
Yeah.
I tend to think of myself as kind of a purist. I love bebop. I love maybe you could go up to hard bop.
Hmm.
But you actually, Red, you have experience in playing some modern stuff, right? Modern stuff and very forward-thinking stuff. Can you talk a little bit about that and what's the direction for modern music going? You've played Bartok. Now I know Bartok is like decades old, but that still is very
Right.
modern music. I mean, let's face it, that's very modern sounding music.
Uh-huh.
Nowadays, like where do you see modern music going? And like, do you talk about the ensemble you played? I remember you told me you were playing in an ensemble that was playing some very cutting edge stuff.
Right. I believe it's Omniform. What was it? Because there are a couple of other projects that I'm involved at the same time. So, when you say modern, do you mean like modern jazz or modern classical or?
You know what? I mean, to me, I feel like almost the genres do blend a little bit. But yeah,
Okay.
let's maybe focus on modern jazz because I think that's something.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow. I think a lot of modern jazz these days really goes down deep into rhythm, like like playing odd meters
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
and just stretching out like like compositionally speaking, like just the new guys they tend to write in the sense that it really stretches out, like formally speaking, like the musical form. So it's not your regular 12 bars, not your
Right.
regular 12 bar blues or your 32 bar American songbook kind of thing. So it's really pretty much extended to it just gets longer, but longer but in a meaningful way.
I
So
used to
uh-huh.
think about like we know fusion, right? A lot of fusion is often on one
Yeah.
chord, like one dominant chord,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
you
yeah.
just do we still have that harmonic density of like the giant steps era? Like I know like fusion
Wow.
that there are a lot of pieces that actually have a lot of harmonic density. You have to
Yeah.
change key a
Yeah.
lot and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Does that happen too? Is that trend also pretty common now?
Um, I've heard of those stuff as well, but I think if we talk about having lots of harmonies and all of that, I think the heydays is probably the bebop era, as well as going into what John Coltrane did, with giant steps and all that. So those were the heydays. Those were where it really exploded in a sense. And then right after, like the guys were just figuring out, like, okay, so we have that information and we have all these things. So what can we do with it? So a lot of guys, a lot of the New York cats that I know,
Cats. Now,
yeah,
cats. That's what jazz musicians call other musicians, right? Cats.
yeah. So I know a lot of cats in New York, as well as all over the world, that they're just doing stuff that really explore, that it's really going deep into rhythm and all of that, odd meters and playing irregular times and all that, which is cool, which is something that I would love to develop as well. But when it comes to fusion, I think my model has always been a guy like Pat Metheny.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah. I think what he does with his later part of his music, I mean, as well as the earlier part, is just really amazing, and I listen to his stuff a lot.
What do you
And
think of what do you think of like that Robert Glasper sound?
oh, right, you mean like the hip hop and jazz thing?
Yeah, the kind of blending of that those genres.
I mean, it's amazing. It's great because, I mean, I mean, they're being true to themselves, right? You know, like it's part of it's part of the soundscape of their world. You know, the hip hop thing,
Yeah,
and
hip
then
hop is now one of the most popular genres on the planet. I don't
yeah,
understand
yeah,
it though personally. I like the rhythms, but I can't quite get into.
yeah.
But
So,
anyway, I wanted to ask you too, Rit. What about modern classical music? Because to me, like there was serialism, which is
uh-huh,
basically, I think second half of the 19th, no, the 20th century, serial music. And
uh-huh.
what is the what's what in conservatories now? What's the new hip stuff in so-called modern classical music in the
Wow.
2000s and on?
I think I'm quite an amateur when it comes to that, really. But as far as I know, I guess if we're going down that direction, I guess as far as I know, the guys like to write in a non-tonal, in
Right.
a non-tonal sense. Like there will not be a lot of melodies going on, and there will just be like I know modern day classical composers they explore sound a lot, like
Yeah.
it's just about like it's I mean sonically speaking like what if we put this sound here and that sound and then try to put them together in ways that have not been done before and stuff like that. So it's not based on it's not even based on scales at all. Like you know you have the quarter tone thingy,
Yeah. Oh, microtones?
microtones, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, those
Wow.
things. So it's
Can you play microtones on the flute?
yeah, it has been done and it's been done a lot actually.
So it's when you this is such a it just reveals my lack of knowledge with orchestration. But like when you play a flute, the mechanics of the flute.
Uh-huh.
Uh, do you control? Can you go flat on a flute? Like if you're not comfortable with your breath technique and everything.
Yeah, you can go flat, you can go sharp, you can yeah, you can pretty much go in lots of direction.
So
Yeah.
do you have to really control it with your breath? Is that how it is?
Yeah, I mean breath control it's so important and I think it should be emphasized more in the beginning.
You know what I would love, Rit, is
Yeah.
if you're such a great improviser, I would love to see you improvise over classical forms, classical. I think the language would be different. It wouldn't be the same jazz
Uh-huh.
language.
Uh-huh.
The rhythm might be different and everything, but
Yeah.
I would love, I mean, you'd be the guy, who could do it because you, you have
Yeah,
that, you
I
could,
mean I don't think it will be too long before you hear that because I am working on that. Yeah.
oh my God. Then we
Yeah.
have to actually to bring you back and to talk about classical improvisation because it's the improvisation is something I think my audience needs to know is coming up with something. It's a skill. Is yes, it is a craft, but I don't
Hmm.
want people to think that it's the realm of genius that is out there that nobody can learn. I mean, obviously, some people are fantastic improvisers; they have talent,
Hmm.
but
Hmm.
improvisation is a craft, correct, Fred?
Yeah, it
It's a
is a
craft,
craft and it's a
and people can learn it, right?
lifetime. Hmm.
People
Yeah.
can learn to
Yeah,
improvise.
exactly.
It's not something that is out of the realm of the average person.
Hmm.
So would you say would it be fair to say that music? I mean, it does do music wonderful things to us. We feel so wonderful when we listen to music, and it really stirs our soul, or it can really frighten us depending on the sounds that we hear. But
Hmm.
with music, anybody can really learn music and learn to be creative in music. Isn't that true?
I think that's true. Yeah.
So it's not like now in our culture where we're so terrified of deviating from the score, um, that that I think we I would love to change this culture where we
Yeah.
can actually take anything and be creative. But you know what? That actually
Yeah.
takes a fundamental shift in our understanding of music because we have to get away from the idea that music. I think we've really elevated performance to the highest level.
Uh-huh.
We expect our performers to be absolute virtuosos in performance, but
Right.
but we were losing that sense that we need to understand what's actually happening, right? I think a lot of people are fooling the audience in the way that they're learning these difficult pieces,
Yeah.
but they themselves are not understanding the harmonies or what's happening, what the composer
Right.
is doing with the song, right?
Yeah.
It amazes me, like when a really young kid is playing like Debussy, right? Debussy, or
Uh-huh.
like let's say there's an 8-year-old prodigy is playing Ravel or Debussy.
Uh-huh.
I always wonder to myself, does this kid really know what kind of harmony is going on right here or right now? Can he improvise in that language? That's a wonderful, And Rit, you can be
Yeah.
the guy, man. You can be I want to
Yeah,
hear.
I mean, I'm still trying.
Are you, are you gonna what? So Rit, listen, I've held you here. I've held you hostage, and I've absolutely enjoyed the conversation with you.
Yeah.
Let's end on this. Tell us where we can find you, and give us all your social media links.
I'm on Instagram, pretty active on that platform. You can find me just at Rit Xu Flute.
Okay, and
Yeah.
would you have a website too that we can
Uh,
go to?
yeah. So it's just my name.com, like ritchu.com.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Do you have any albums you're releasing or shows coming up that we can go to?
Yeah. At the moment, working on a duo album project. So I'll be playing some stuff for flute and piano. It's mostly gonna be some original compositions as well as some ballads because I'm really a sucker for ballads.
Aren't we all, man? Aren't we all?
Yeah, yeah,
um, we got to have you back, man. I feel like we could keep going.
yeah,
I feel like we can definitely talk about more stuff.
yeah,
But I'm gonna let you go, and please come back.
yeah, yeah.
It's been such a pleasure to have you.
Always around, man.
Well, Rit, thank you so much for coming
Yeah,
to the broadcast. And I'm going to
thanks,
put
Nick.
all the links of how people can come and watch your stuff, all in the show notes page.
Yeah,
And Rit, let me just end off by saying Rit is an unbelievable player. Listen, I didn't even really know the capacity of the flute until I saw this guy live in front of me playing when we did that gig together, and it blew me away. I mean, it just goes to show, you really have to learn about the world. There's so much out there that you can learn. There's so many instruments, so many great players for each instrument. And Rit, I think you were an exemplary model of not just a flute player, but like a solid musician. And
thanks, man.
I think we
Yeah,
definitely need more of you guys in Singapore but definitely around the world as well.
thanks, man. Really appreciate that.
So with that, Rit, take care, and
Yeah,
we'll see you soon.
yeah. Thanks, Nick. Bye.
You've been listening to the Nikhil Hogan Show. Thank you so much for listening. There are shows 5 days a week, Monday through Friday. Please hit subscribe to the podcast and leave a rating. I would really appreciate it. Also, stay tuned for my forthcoming book on music education. Announcements on that will be coming soon. Thank you again for listening. See you later.